Hey guys, it's Gamma, and this is episode 5 of Exposing the Cult, a podcast in which we take a deep dive into what used to be one of the most inclusive and prideful communities, the LGBT, and how it was corrupted from within by gender ideology. We've been on quite an adventure together so far. We've talked about the origins and John Money, we've discussed conversion therapy and fascism, and we even discussed 1984's Orwellian society. When we last met, we discussed doublethink and newspeak and how terminology was modified to create lunacy so that no matter what, you were never fully right in what you thought or believed. You could only believe what the party wanted you to believe. Ignore your eyes and ears, they said. They wanted us to think in black-white, which meant that if the party said that black was white, then you were to think, and not only think, but know that black was truly white, even if it was not. This is how I see gender ideology in the way that they want for us to think. If they say that a man is a woman or a woman is a man, we are to not trust our eyes and ears, but only believe what they claim. And there is a fallacy in this thought process. We need norms. We need to be able to trust our eyes and ears. That's how we as humans have an innate nature to recognize potential danger. I guess you could say that I could ignore my eyes and ears and maybe even my nose if I saw a fire. Oh, I didn't even know that was there. And walk away from it. Act like nothing's wrong. Some might be thinking, oh, come on. Saying that a man is a woman isn't the same as ignoring a fire. Well, I would have to say that it is. Because if you look at the statistics in prisoners, especially in the UK Parliament's statistics, actually, it's on their official website. 58.9% of transgendered women prisoners who go into female units have assault or rape records against women and records in history of violence against women. So it's safe to say that if women don't want men who claim to be transgender because of self-ID and because of the GRA, which in England is the Gender Recognition Act, and in Canada, we're no longer allowed to have female spaces without any self-ID trans women because it's against the law. We can be fined $25,000 or go to jail in Canada if we decided to misgender someone. The rabbit hole that we've been going down has been very interesting, to say the least. And this week, I decided to read Cultish. This is a novel written by Amanda Montell. She discusses many facets of how the language is used. I know last time we talked language as well. We looked at the examples, though, of how the trans terms are meant to confuse us. They have 3 different words for the same definition, but each definition is different. And they offend each other when you use them, if you use them incorrectly. It's meant to thought police us into thinking how other people expect us to think and not having our own freedom of thought. And I was very intrigued to read this book, Cultish, because I wanted to understand more about how leaders or cults spoke, what kind of vernacular, what kind of characteristics. But before we get into the depths of today's episode, I wanted to first say thank you. Thank you to everyone who has been liking, sharing, all of the subscribers. You guys really do keep me going, and I appreciate that you come back each week, leave comments, leave me new rabbit holes to trail down, and tie everything together. I really do appreciate your engagement. So if you're watching or you're listening and you haven't already, make sure to tap that subscribe button, have the little noti bell so that you don't miss a single podcast episode. These are permanently going to be released on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time from this point forward. I do have something that I want to show those watching on YouTube. Unfortunately, if you are listening, you can't see them. However, if you go to exposingthecult.com, you'll be able to check out everything that I am discussing right now. This is not sponsored. I am using Teespring, but I've got merch. So we have the Radical Feminist mug for my rad fam out there. And then we have the Exposing the Cult mug with my logo and the face that you see at the beginning, and as my little profile picture. So I'm very excited to share that with you guys. There's t-shirts and hoodies. I picked up myself a pillow of the RadFem symbol, and just so you guys know that are listening, it's a neon pink Unicode symbol for the female, and it's got Radical Feminist on the inside and Exposing the Cult across the line of the female symbol. So I'm pretty proud of it. This is a really nice pillow. I'm actually pleasantly surprised with the merchandise that I ended up getting and the quality of it. The quality was definitely worth it to me. They did send me a t-shirt that is too small, but I will show you my husband's. One second. So for my husband, I got him a t-shirt and it's got my face on it. Although you can't really see it. Oh, there you go. There. Oh, I'm trying to show YouTube. It's not really working, but I tried, and that's all that matters. So if you'd like to purchase any of these items, there's male and female items on there. I plan to make a lot more designs. I'm working on some things, and hopefully you guys will like them as much as I do. Now let's get into what you're really here for, the podcast episode. I have for you guys my handy dandy notebook in which I keep all of my notes of everything that I'm reading. And you're probably wondering, Kama, what is cultish? Well, Amanda Montell coined this term to describe communities that are cult-like in one way or another, but not necessarily connected to the supernatural. They have specific dialect, glossaries of buzzwords, phrases, code language. They create a special language to influence people's behaviors and beliefs, and it's so effective that in part simply because speech is the first thing that we're willing to change about ourselves and the last thing that we let go. Page 43. I found this to be a very interesting read for a number of reasons. She goes into the depth of some of the cult leaders, specifically Jim Jones, who, if you guys may or may not be familiar with, he had a cult in which he created the Promised Land, right? It was a socialist-based community, and they went to South Africa, and he attempted to create the Promised Land. They were called the People's Temple. And this guy was an interesting character, to say the least. I think based on what I read in her work, which she did phenomenal research, by the way, I do suggest reading it. Most cults that we are aware of that become extreme have one central figure. They're typically a charismatic leader, and they are able to easily manipulate individuals. They code switch very easily depending on who they're talking to, which is why they're so charismatic, which is actually the first cult criteria that she lists on page 32. Her criteria states that cults have charismatic leaders, mind-altering behaviors, sexual exploitation, financial exploitation, us versus them mentalities towards non-members. Some have supernatural beliefs. The result of this is that a power imbalance is built on members' devotion, hero worship, and absolute trust, which frequently facilitates abuse on the part of unaccountable leaders. The reason that these charismatic leaders are easily able to control the members is because they're being let down. They're being let down by society. They're being let down by their family, maybe their friends, work, school. It becomes easy for them to be manipulated into an ideology that normal everyday people probably wouldn't fall for. But Amanda does say something about this, actually. She completed an interview with a Rebecca Moore, who was a religion professor at the San Diego University. And this professor had to say that you cannot force someone to believe something they absolutely do not on any level want to believe by using some set of evil techniques, such as washing their brain. And in this, she was talking about brainwashing because, as you guys know, we discussed brainwashing on episode 1. So Amanda Montell's research showed that most consulted experts either avoided the term brainwashing or completely rejected it. She said, most of us tend to take brainwashing literally, imagining that some neurological rewiring occurs during cult indoctrinations. But brainwashing is a metaphor. There is nothing objective about it. I do agree, actually, with what Rebecca Moore had to say. I don't think that you are able to be manipulated if you are not open and willing at some level to be manipulated. But I disagree with brainwashing not being real. We have other terminology for that. For instance, Stockholm Syndrome. Young girls who end up becoming kidnapped and are living their lives as a victim will end up somehow in their brain rewiring to think that this is a normal life for them, that this is acceptable. They have accepted their reality that was forced upon them. They have Stockholm Syndrome for a reason, and I can't help but to correlate Stockholm Syndrome and brainwashing. Let's take a look at Stockholm Syndrome, since we're on the subject real quick. Before me, I have the clevelandclinic.org website in regards to Stockholm Syndrome. It says that Stockholm Syndrome is a coping mechanism to a captive or abusive situation. People develop positive feelings towards their captors or abusers over time. This condition applies to situations including child abuse, coach-athlete abuse, relationship abuse, and sex trafficking. I would just like to point out that in Amanda Montell's book, she discusses a lot about how MLMs and life coaches are rather cultish. And don't worry, we're going to get a little bit farther into that one as well. I was very impressed by the amount of sources, like I said, that Amanda used. One of which was Gary Eberle. He wrote a book called Dangerous Words, and he said, the very material that fabricates our reality is language. With words, we breathe reality into being. And as I read that, I thought, well, yeah, that's true. I mean, we talk about manifestation, and if we say something enough, we can believe that it's true. You know, I am a strong person. I am a good person. I am doing the right thing. I am going to get that job. I am going to win that race. I can do this. I can achieve that. I can lose that weight. I can do that dance. You know, we manifest things for ourselves, right? But I think that there is manifestation of things that are really attainable for an individual in society. And then there are things that are simply not. For instance, you cannot materialize into the fabric of reality that a biological man is a woman. It just simply cannot happen. You can perform surgeries. You can provide medication that is going to alter them at some level, but never fully. The body function is never the same. And saying that a man is a woman isn't simply going to breathe the ability to carry a child. It just doesn't. There would have to be intervention by man to do so. And the only way that would happen is if a woman's uterus was given to a man to experiment on. And not only that, it would be the child who would also be a lifelong experiment. And how can we say that that is just or right? How can we say that's humane at all? And in regards to that, what about women who would love the ability to have a child? Are we going to be putting men before women because they want to have a baby and carry a baby? There are so many women who suffer with endometriosis and PCOS and variations of infertility, but they're not put first. We're supposed to feed into the mind of an individual man who believes that he is a woman, and so he deserves to be at the front of the list. This is what the cult wants you to believe. When we're online and we're saying things like, you're a bigot, you're a transphobe, you're a TERF, because we say a woman is an adult human female, or to leave the children out of this. We know that this is something that all of them are doing. The people who are in the cult and support the cult blindly without even realizing what they're supporting. They're doing this to shame us. And this is a technique used by cults. If you're a defector, they want nothing to do with you. I discussed this on a TikTok actually earlier this week. We talked about Scientology, and we talked about Leah Remini and how when she made her docuseries, Scientology, they even came out with an official release, a report, a letter in regards to Leah. I'll go ahead and pull that up for us. So this, for those listening, is the website of Scientology. I've pulled up their newsroom media for us to review together. And if you're on YouTube, then you can see it here on the right side of me. Okay, so it says, the Church of Scientology International. Leah Remini has become what she once declared she never wanted to be known as. This bitter ex-Scientologist. As USA Today wrote, Miss Remini is as famous for being an ex-Scientologist as she is an actress. She needs to move on with her life instead of pathetically exploiting her former religion, her former friends, and other celebrities for money and attention to appear relevant. Time out. The quote from the USA Today ended at "she's an actress." Everything after was the Church of Scientology's statement. So here they are shaming her. And this is what cults do. They treat anybody who does not agree with their ideology in this way. She needs to move on with her life instead of pathetically exploiting her former religion, her former friends, and other celebrities for money and attention to appear relevant again. Pathetically. Move on. They're shaming her. They're trying to make her feel like she's less of an individual, a person, a human with rights, like her value is less because she is defected. And if with gender ideology, you do not agree with conforming to being a cis person, if you do not agree that men are women, and you do not agree with men being able to self-ID and automatically have rights to a female space, this is the way that they talk down to you. This is a form of manipulation. And this is exactly the cult think, mind think. And they're trained and taught to talk about people like this. So here's the rest of the letter. Sadly, bitterness and anger are common threads through Miss Remini's life. Miss Remini is showing herself to be a spoiled, entitled diva who still obviously complains about such petty matters as her seating placement, limo ride, 5-star hotel accommodations, and the paparazzi's failure to recognize her nearly a decade ago. Pause. To give you guys some context, this was the Tom Cruise wedding when he married Katie Holmes, right? I think that's what they're talking about. She discusses it. Basically, what happened was she had asked about where a very high level figure, a woman, I think it was a wife of someone powerful in Scientology. She had simply asked why she was missing the wedding. And then they started treating her poorly after this. This was like a turning point, right? So asking was a bad thing for Leah to do. Okay, unpause. She also inserts herself uninvited into the family matters of others. Rather than take responsibility for self-inflicted problems, she is quick to blame others. When her firing from the talk erupted into a public embarrassment for her in 2012, we tried to help her pick up off the floor, but she treated everyone around her in a degrading, bullying manner. Her behavior was intolerable. Pause. Okay, see there. They're talking about her as though she is a child. They're degrading her. They're talking about her being the degrading bully, but this entire letter literally oozes cruelty, in my opinion. They don't have any compassion for her because she defected. And that is exactly how gender ideologists treat anybody who says one thing that they don't agree with. Leah Remini knows the truth. She conveniently rewrites in her revisionist history. The real story is that she desperately tried to remain a Scientologist in 2013, knowing full well she was on the verge of being expelled for refusing to abide by the high level of ethics and decency Scientologists are expected to maintain. Her repeated ethical lapses and callous treatment of others led to an ecclesiastical review, which resulted in her being expelled. She now regurgitates the tired myths the church has repeatedly debunked, circulated by the same tiny clique of expelled former staffers bitter at having lost the positions they enjoyed before their maleficence and unethical conduct were uncovered. Miss Remini is now joined at the hip with those collection of deadbeats, admitted liars, self-admitted perjurers, wife beaters, and worse. All right, pause. So listen to the words that are written by the Church of Scientology, okay? They call them deadbeats, the defectors. You're deadbeats, you're liars, you're perjurers, you're wife beaters, you're worse. What do gender ideologists say about anybody who has a dissenting opinion or are detransitioners? You were never trans, you're a bigot, you're transphobic, you're homophobic, you're a Nazi, you're a fascist. They're constantly trying to drill into us that we are the ones who are wrong and evil. But they are manipulating and gaslighting and trying to control the situation. And that is what they do with their language. And that is what they do with the church here in this letter about Leah. And that's what gender ideologists do to anybody, including their friends or family, who say one thing that isn't right in the ideology of gender. Miss Remini also continues her obnoxious efforts to harass the leader of the Church of Scientology and his wife, with whom Miss Remini has been obsessed and has stalked for years. This culminated in a scandalous report filed in 2013 with the Los Angeles Police Department that her book shows was a fraud from the outset. It was solely intended to get publicity and harass the leader of a religion and his wife, who had refused contact with Miss Remini because of her disgraceful behavior that was both abusive and unethical. Miss Remini also outrageously touts that the LAPD failed to do its job when it investigated her phony report, and within hours unambiguously declared it unfounded, causing her stunt to blow up in her face. Anyone knowingly making a false report to law enforcement is a bald-faced liar who should be held accountable for diverting police from protecting the public. They spin her like she's just this evil, maniacal person, but actually it's usually the cult leaders who are evil and maniacal and controlling. Scientology is the only major religion to be founded in the 20th century and emerge as a major religion in the 21st century. The church has grown more in the past decade than in its first 50 years combined, under the ecclesiastical leadership of Mr. Miscavige, a visionary parishioners and church staff hold in the highest regard for carrying out the legacy of the Scientology founder through the Renaissance the religion is now experiencing. Mr. Miscavige works tirelessly for the parishioners and their benefit, and to aid millions through support and participation in global humanitarian initiatives and social betterment programs. The real story of the Church of Scientology, what it does, its beliefs and practices, is available at www.scientology.org. Yeah, okay. So why was that letter important? Because it's reflectant of how people are treated whenever they defect from a cult. And let's not forget, Scientology really did start as a cult, and some would still say that it is a cult. But what they did was really smart. They actually became an official religion, mostly for tax benefits. But if you're a religion, you have protections under our law here in the United States. So I can't say that they weren't smart. That's for sure. So Amanda Montell talks about the theory of performativity. And it says that language does not simply describe or reflect who we are, it creates who we are, like making a promise, performing a wedding. Speech has consequential power to construct and constrain our reality. Chants, prayers, turn of phrase can be used to shape the culture of understanding. Trans people are people and they belong here. Trans people are people and they belong here. Trans people are people and they belong here. Anybody else seen that video? Oh, yeah. There is chanting, that's for sure. I think that the theory of performativity is very relevant because they're trying to convince us very hard that men are women and women are men and they can be either. And that's inherently not true. It's not true. You can project yourself. You can perform as though you are the other gender, but you are not, right? And the issue is that they believe 100% inherently, and they deny the undeniable truth that their sex is not what they claim it to be. And they want for us, everyone else, to deny our reality and use their terminology to help create the reality in which they want to live in. But we live in one reality, and we do not have to bend our terminology in order to appease and affirm someone else's reality. That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. So I mentioned earlier code switching, and I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about that. So code switching, it's switching languages or dialects based on an audience to express a specific mood, emphasize a statement, adapt to a social convention, or communicate with a certain identity. It can be used to ensure respect, or it can be used for survival, and it can be used to connivingly gain trust. This was a method that Jim Jones used, specifically on Black Americans who he was able to get into his cult. He'd go sit in the back of Black churches and he would watch the priests and the ministers. He learned terminology that was only used by Blacks at that time, and he would turn around and use that terminology. He would have Black-only sermons to make them feel special and basically like reverse racism against white people. And he would say things against white people, even though he was a white man. He would spew essentially self-hatred to make his Black congregates feel elevated above others. And when I see gender ideologists code switching, and we can see this on live streams, specifically to TikTok, okay? I've gone on TikTok live and I've watched one group on one side and one group on the other, and the two different, completely different lives. And I have seen where there's, trans women are more of women than biological women. Like, we're more of women than you are, right? And it's all of these pro-trans, TRAs, I'm cis. If you're not cis, you're trans, this, that, and the other. And they kind of just like all feed into this weird ideology and everything. But I've seen individuals be in those boxes and like agree with them and saying everything that they're saying using the cis het terminology and giving themselves pronouns, this, that, and the other. Oh, you could just call me sir. And you can just call me Dom, like dominatrix, like weird shit. You can call me queen. Like, it's weird, okay? And then I've seen them come in and say, you know, these people shouldn't be in here. How dare they call me sis, blah, 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 blah. And they're like playing two sides. I don't know why, if they think it's funny, who they're trolling, what they're doing, but they're code switching to sometimes to gain information. We have seen for a fact TRAs that have tried to manipulate individuals, manipulate women into making them believe that this movement of women's rights and to protect the children is because we hate trans people. And that's simply not true. If what you get out of everything that I say is that I hate trans people, then you're wrong. That is not true. It is not true at all. What is true, however, is that gender ideology is saying that self-ID is acceptable, and this is not. We cannot allow for any man to claim to be a woman and inherently have right to a female space because he says so. That is how harm happens. That's how problems happen. If we had two fish ponds, one full of koi, one full of piranhas, and one day we decided, hey, this piranha's a koi fish. All right, cool. Let's put this piranha into the pool with the koi fish. And that piranha ends up eating the koi fish and killing all of the koi fish. Well, clearly, we should have never placed the piranha into the koi fish pond. Now, let's say there's the two ponds and you have a piranha who some reason is super old, doesn't have any teeth, doesn't have any fight in him. It just eats whatever kibble you drop in there for it, right? And this piranha is getting beat up a little bit. He's at risk. So you're like, all right, piranha, you are a koi fish. You don't have any teeth. You can't harm anybody. So then you plop that piranha into the koi fish pond. Well, hey, this other piranha's like, yo, he's over there. That piranha's in that koi fish pond. I am a koi fish. I want to be in that pond. So you pick up that piranha and you say, well, this other piranha's okay, so let me just drop this piranha in here too. And you drop that piranha in, and not only do all of the koi fish die, but the original piranha is harmed in the process. See, it is dangerous to just simply blindly accept things that are not true. Fundamental truth is so important. And that's how we prevent ourselves from falling into cults like the Jim Jones, Jonestown Promised Land, in which all of his congressioners, all of them, they all died. A congressman came to visit because he heard from families that were stateside that their family members were starving to death. They tried to plant and grow crops in the wrong location. And when the congressman, 3 reporters, and someone else came with him to the location, I think it was the pilot, and they were there for like a day or so. And then when he went to leave, 2 individuals tried to defect and run away with them. They tried to hop on the helo and they were shot down. The congressman died. The 3 reporters died, the pilot died, and I believe so did the two individuals that were from the actual cult as well. Jim actually used cyanide and completed a mass suicide. There was 2 options for all of the 100 people that were in the Promised Land. It was drink the Kool-Aid that was laced with cyanide, or you will be shot. And some people did try to run, but most ended up drinking the Kool-Aid. There was a select few who were not present because they were actually out in town trying to do some kind of philanthropy or networking or something of the sort. But Jones weaponized fear in his followers, and he claimed suicide was not bad, but a revolutionary act, while surrounding members with armed guards and 2 options: die by poison or be shot. So it says here that extreme cult leaders typically have taken an apocalyptic stance on the universe and within them at its center, and they believe that their immediate demise means everyone must go down too. But I think that due to the internet in this day and age, things have changed a little bit. We have more of an ability to have a farther reach than we did before. So while Amanda Montell talks about MLMs and certain workout clubs and things of that sort, I can't help but to think that there is more than one nefarious influencer that allegedly could be potentially harming people by manipulating them emotionally into an ideology that is not accepting of who an individual is in their body. They claim that there's no boys or girls, and they claim that you can be non-binary trans, which doesn't make sense. Trans is either you're one sex or the other, and you transitioned from one sex to the other. That's what trans is. But you can't be non-binary and be trans. And they're trying to confuse us and say, yes, you can, right? There is a individual that we're going to be looking into now. I mentioned earlier that I wanted to discuss. I have not ever made any content in regards to this creator before because I saw what happened to a woman who did. But the difference is that she had a much larger platform and a much larger following than I do. And I think that it's okay for me to speak about this because this is the kind of behavior that we are concerned about as parents. We are concerned about as women. And the cult of gender ideology is trying to normalize this kind of thought control, in my opinion. Okay, let's get into it, shall we? We're going to discuss Jeffrey Marsh. Now, I know he was being talked about and discussed in the previous months because many people thought that Jeffrey had a predatory behavior. And the community, the LGBTQ community, freaked out. And honestly, this was like the catalyst for women like myself to start waking up. They called out on specific behaviors of one individual, and the entire LGBTQ community lashed back at a woman who spoke up about it. And it became a free-for-all frenzy. And that is when you started to see the LGB defect from the T. And you see LGBTQ members telling gay men who literally fought for gay rights that you don't deserve to be a part of this community. And these men are like, fuck your community. I don't want to be a part of your community anymore. Because it is not the same community that it was. And there is a video on TikTok of an actress, a trans woman. She's got like short white hair, right? This trans woman, so a man, okay? And this trans woman says that Jeffrey Marsh is one of their most prized and precious leaders. See where I'm going with this? So while the cult of gender ideology doesn't currently have one de facto leader, I believe that there are enough individuals who have enough influence in this ideology in which they are plucking the minds of millions of people across the world and on the internet and planting the seed of gender ideology and this belief in unreality. And so as we go through and we start to look at some of these videos about Jeffrey, I'm not making any allegations. I'm just simply making observations in regards to behaviors that I read in Cultish and about individuals who were cult leaders and some of the language or methods of communicating with individuals who follow them on the internet. You know, I mean, if it's culty, it's cultish, right? Okay, let's watch this video. As we know, Matt Walsh is on the screen here. For those listening, Matt Walsh is on the screen. So we're going to hear him first, and then we're going to get into it.
Here is a person who identifies, I think, as both trans and non-binary. And they're explaining why, if you're a parent, you shouldn't be concerned about him going into a restroom with your young daughter. He explains why. Here it is.
I hope everyone knows that we need to protect the women and children has been used against marginalized people for most of human history. These comments upset me because it's anti-trans, of course, but also it strikes me as anti your own daughters, anti-young people, anti-women. If you are a young person, if you're a daughter, if you are a woman, would you do me a favor? Please let all of the men in your life know that you can take care of yourself. Let them know you don't need protecting, and that you especially don't want protection if it means erasing trans people from public life.
I'm pausing it. This is the problem. This is the problem with gender ideology right here. In the same, turn of phrase here, Jeffrey is saying, oh, this is bad for women. And do you know why? Because it hurts trans people and it makes you seem weak. You're not weak, are you? You don't need protection, do you? You don't get it. You actually don't get it, do you? See, we don't need protection in women's spaces because there aren't men in women's spaces. At least there weren't until self-ID came around and Canada decided to make it law that any self-ID'd man who says they're a woman can be and must be in any female space that they desire, regardless of anything that a woman has to say. It is this ideology that has been so shoved down our throats that has made it dangerous and has made the need for women to have protection from men by actual men who give a shit about women. This ideology made it unsafe for women again. This right here, this video, this rhetoric that this individual has just said has made it unsafe for women. And if you don't recognize that, then you're being manipulated. This is the same way that these cult leaders would manipulate other people. Bring your guard down. It's perfectly fine to take your guard down. We're not a threat to you. But if we do harm to you, we'll never acknowledge that we did it because they weren't really trans. You're safe with the trans. But the trans people who hurt you, they're not really trans. They were never really trans. 10, 15 years of being trans. That's gaslighting. That's narcissistic. That's a lie. And that is the same rhetoric that this man is saying in this video. Goodness gracious.
Yes, he says, nothing creepy about that at all. The man in the dress here says that, no, don't worry about protecting your daughter when I walk into the restroom with her. She can handle herself. That's what this guy is saying. She can take care of herself. This is coming from someone who they're saying, oh, your daughter, she doesn't need to be protected. You're infantilizing your daughter by trying to stop grown men in dresses from walking into the bathroom and potentially abusing them. Meanwhile, this same person would say that if you use the wrong pronoun in his presence, you're causing him deep psychological and even physical harm.
Yes.
Here is a person who...
Yes, Matt Walsh always makes so much sense. If you guys didn't catch What is a Woman on Twitter last weekend, I'm sorry, you sorely missed out. I did retweet it. I did. All right, let's see what else TikTok has for us, eh?
Parents should stop DMing me saying, what if my kid transitions and then they regret it? Then they change their mind. Why aren't you DMing me to say, what if I force my trans child to be someone they're not until they're 18, and it psychologically scars them and future generations for hundreds of years? Why aren't you afraid of making that mistake?
Okay. Oh, is that what we're going to do, Jeffrey? Is that what we're going to say, really? Okay. What if chemically castrating and mutilating the bodies of children and giving them way, way too high, pumping them full of these drugs, these hormones and this testosterone, right? Way too high of dosages. And they end up having children and babies, if they're lucky to detransition and have those babies, that are mutilated. Oh, you know what? I guess the problem wouldn't be for boys, because if they're even able to actually produce some sperm, then maybe they'll be okay towards the beginning, right? But then again, if you're putting them on puberty blockers before they even hit puberty, then you've already made them inept and they're not able to create enough sperm in order to potentially father a child, right? See, what's happening is that there are now detransitioners who will never be able to have children. And you know what that has done? One man could father 100 children. One woman could make a child per year for maybe, let's say, 15 years. She could have up to 15 kids. And each of those children could produce hundreds of children and children after that and children after that generationally. What transitioning children is doing is absolutely scarring and destroying future generations of children. You have destroyed family lines by pushing rhetoric like this. This absolutely feels like something a cult leader would say, to manipulate these parents who are genuinely concerned. What if my child regrets transitioning? Why aren't you saying, what if I scar my child by not letting them transition? It is our responsibility as parents to protect our children from the things that they yet to understand. And they do not understand at 11 years old what it means to be at 25, at 30, when you want to have children. But you can't. And if you do end up having children, you can't experience what it's like to breastfeed your child, which, by the way, as a woman, I am grateful and glad that I was able to breastfeed my child. It was one of the most amazing feelings that I've ever had aside from being pregnant. I was in pain while pregnant, but I tell you what, with endometriosis, my pregnancy was the best that I as a woman have felt in the last 15 to 20 years of my life. Being pregnant was a blessing, and it was a wonderful experience for me as a woman. And breastfeeding my child helped other relatives, women in my family, take that same route, because I was the first in at least 3 known generations to feed my child with my own breast milk. This is something that young women will not understand because it's weird and it's gross and it's kind of like, taboo, because it's been taboo from the generations before us for the last 2-3 generations now, since they created formula in the first place. And what this man is saying in this video is, don't prevent the mutilation of your children. You're going to be causing damage to future generations if you don't cut off their boobs, if you don't allow them to get a vaginoplasty, if you don't put them on these puberty blockers and this Lupron that makes them inept and makes them have the inability to have a child. That is the message that I receive from this video. And the way that he is looking at this camera, right? The way that he's looking at the camera is clearly indicative to me of the way that a man like Jim Jones would have looked down on someone had they not said the right thing in the right way. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go on. We're going to do a couple more. We'll do a couple more here and we'll see how this goes.
Men fear me.
No, they don't.
And women will be like, I love your shoes.
Oh, I love Lady J.
And men will be like, what? Did someone walk in? I'm not looking.
Let's review that statement. So because someone doesn't acknowledge one's presence and give out compliments, that means they're afraid? Really?
The world, which is still sadly largely run by men, wants to destroy trans people. It's because of our power.
In order to be able to actually begin having any real power, a person should know the difference between indifference and intimidation.
I love
Men
her.
fear me.
Lady J, if you haven't been following her, she is absolutely phenomenal. She always talks just like this, and she doesn't change the way that she speaks. And you know what? Living for it. Her level of calm is much more centered than mine, because I'll pop off. I will pop off for sure. But yeah, see, there he is. Again, Jeffrey is victimizing himself and making it seem like, oh my God, they're afraid of me. You're afraid of me. Don't be scared of me. This is weird. It's weird, it's manipulative, and why is it necessary to marginalize men? Or as they would say, cis men, right? Like, here's the problem. And I said this actually, I'm gonna swap over to the cam. So I said this on Twitter the other day. I was having a conversation with somebody, and or maybe it was TikTok. I don't know. I'm on both all the time. So I was having a conversation with someone, and I said, I truly believe that there is a difference between masculinity and misogyny, and it's important to note the difference. And I think that this trans movement that has such a hyper focus and hyper elevation of trans women, so men, is really pushing for like a men's rights movement to encroach upon women's rights. And it's very misogynistic because they tell us that we're the transphobes, we're the bigots, you know, we deserve to die. We get the death threats all the time. They like to play victim, but we really do get death threats all of the time online. And it's quite misogynistic for a man to sit there and tell us that we don't know what it means to really be a woman and that they've worked harder for their womanhood than we have. Like, that's ridiculous. That is misogynistic. In my opinion, masculinity is like, you know, the traditional kind of cowboy kind of guy, right? Opens the door for you, walks on the outside of the curb, makes sure that, you know, if you're not willing to make dinner that night, he takes care of dinner that night, no problem. And sometimes he's going to get down and he's going to make sure that the floor gets mopped or whatever. Like, a masculine man is going to be your partner. And that's what I think of masculinity now. I think masculinity is a guy's guy, but that loves and respects the women around him. These are different than misogynists. And there's this thing called MGTOW, men going their own way. And I kind of heard this, this conspiracy theory that there were men who were MGTOW that became these things called trans maxers. Yeah, that's a doozy. So maybe next week we'll get into that. I don't know yet. I haven't quite decided what we're going to discuss next week. I think I might let inspiration hit, but I think that we need to be mindful of the individuals who seem to have the farthest reach and the most influence on the internet when it comes to gender ideology. Because your friends or family may follow these individuals without even realizing what's being done to them. The theory of performativity, the manipulation, the just code switching, and trying to make themselves the victims. And I mean, Jim Jones, he said, we can't live unless we live here. They want to eradicate us. They want to kill us. They want to destroy us. And with gender ideology, they're saying, if you can't transition, you're better off dead. Arm trans kids. They're trying to militarize kids. And they're literally trying to militarize kids and fight for this ideology that is just rooted in unreality. And parents are fighting back. The Muslims in Canada standing alongside Christians and atheists and parents who are saying enough is enough. You're not going to force this ideology onto our children. We have religious freedom for a reason. We should never, ever have to be forced into learning these things. Nor should these kids be forced to participate in Ramadan or prayer because of our child's religion. These are individual to the child. This is not meant to be in schools. And there have been some phenomenal protests going on. I have a friend who was at Canada's protest yesterday. And so that would have been Friday the 9th. And she's uploading like 2.5 hours of footage. She'll be uploading that to YouTube. So if I can find it, I will be sharing it for you. If it's up by the time I post this video. If not, then go check out Nat La Pirat. She'll probably be jumping in my comments. She had an amazing experience, she said, at the protest. It was quite the scene for sure. Again, I just need to say thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight and diving into some of the stuff that I found out in Cultish, as well as observing Jeffrey. I'm sorry I couldn't do more. I just really don't feel comfortable watching his content, and I think you may understand why now. But aside from that, don't forget, like, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure to tune in next week for the next episode of Exposing the Cult. See you then.